Good to be joined again on the Colour of Country Life Flow FM by agricultural analyst with Rabobank, Dennis Voznesenski. How are you, Dennis?
I am good, Ricky. How are you?
Look, we're both okay, I think, but it's been a tough old time for farmers, particularly in the eastern states. I think you might have mentioned recently they've planted multiple times and still had no success.
Yeah, look, that's right. Especially, you look at what was happening in New South Wales even before the extreme flooding on the east coast. That's now inundated lots of large parts of Victoria. But in New South Wales, even at planting, there were farmers replanting canola 3 times because back then the prices made sense. Then when you went through the growing season, there was a lot of rainfall. Then you went into the most recent weather event, which was when we released the crop report a couple of weeks ago, and things got even worse. And now if you look at areas around Forbes, again, they're getting really bad. The forecast is for a little bit of reprieve, but there's been so much area impacted that it's definitely not the crop year everyone was hoping for.
Yeah, I saw something from the Bureau of Meteorology in the last 24 hours that they had at Forbes the national record for the week of 120 mils of rain in just one day. That's going to put a lot of crops in dire straits.
Yeah, look, it's absolutely ridiculous, the amount of rain we're having, and it's causing the window, which typically causes a lot of pressure for pricing, downward pressure, it's causing that to be extended outwards later to the year. And what that means is that for pricing right now, it's sticking around at decent levels, especially for something like AP1, because there's expected to be a lot more feed wheat as opposed to more decent protein wheat. And the challenge is, though, eventually it's going to get dry, and then everyone who would have harvested gradually from, say, late October till December or January, now everyone's going to start harvesting at the exact same point, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on the bulk handling system once that actually starts. Hopefully, it gets dry enough for that to actually start, but that's just something interesting to keep in mind.
Yeah, certainly would be good that if farmers can get that break in the weather and actually get the crop in, almost better than getting it in, regardless of the quality, than not getting it in at all. But it does sound to me then that there might be some premium pricing on offer for those in the western part of South Australia who are getting their crop off now.
Yeah, well, if you, for example, they could get APW or higher protein wheat, there's definitely going to be demand for it. There's going to be less of it around this year, which theoretically means the spread between APW and feed wheat is going to be quite strong. So if there is going to be APW available, that's a pretty good position to be in for your operation because, yeah, as we were talking about on the East Coast, there's a lot of feed wheat around, even in South Australia. In the South, so I was talking to a mate of mine in the upper Southeast who's a farmer there, and he was saying the point at which rain stops being beneficial passed about 2 weeks ago. And now the more rain that comes, it's just the more of a negative effect it's going to have.
Are we seeing anything from like ABARES or other reporting agencies in terms of estimations? We were talking about a record crop, but I imagine that's already probably going to be projected downwards, maybe even significantly.
Well, ABARES, I believe, is coming out with something in early December. That was their schedule, I think. What we do have to keep in mind, though, is that even if APW or higher protein wheat gets converted into feed, that's still tons around. So there's still going to be a lot of tonnage. It's just the quality is not going to be there.
Yeah, that's going to have an impact on price, I'm sure. When it comes to canola, how are we going there with the growing conditions? We had the fields of gold a few months ago, but it's all maturing in the paddock now.
Yeah, well, look, again, it depends on where you are. If you're in Western Australia, things are going great. Parts of South Australia, well, apart from the most recent rains. But that, from what I've heard, the recent weather events have been scattered. Some areas very close by, like one area has been severely impacted, the other hasn't been impacted at all. So Western Australia is still the standout in Australia. South Australia, also compared to the East Coast, going well, but on the East Coast itself, we look at Victoria and New South Wales, we're going to have to wait for those rains to finally stop to see what the impact would be on something like canola. But if you look at pricing right now, Port Adelaide's around $830 per tonne. So that's historically still incredibly high. But still, in my mind, once it does get dry and everyone starts harvesting, and possibly everyone's going to start harvesting more at a similar time compared to normal, it would at the very least put a cap on pricing locally. And we would expect it to ease prices as well as everyone gets going.
Now, we've talked often in our conversations about something that now has to play second fiddle to the awful weather situation, and that's Vladimir Putin and the Ukraine. Now, has this deal or this attempt to defy Putin and keep trading grain through the Black Sea, has that eventuated through the UN, or has it got a little bit more difficult?
No, well, it's gotten more difficult. So towards the end of October, Ukraine bombed a Navy facility in Crimea, and Russia said overnight that, we're getting out of the grain deal. Then Russia talked to Turkey, After that, Putin said, okay, we're back in the grain deal, but we're not saying we're going to re-sign it once it expires on the 19th of November. And right now, there's a negotiation between Russia and the United Nations about, what the United Nations can do to make sure that Russia does sign the grain deal and allows vessels to continue leaving Ukraine. But it's getting really messy because, for example, after that phone call with Turkey, Russia said, even if we cancel the grain deal, there's still going to be grain that will be allowed to go to Turkey from Ukraine, which then means what? They're only going to shoot ships that aren't going to Turkey? How would they even know? It's getting quite messy.
Well, it's also messy, isn't it? Because the UN, I think, overnight have declared that they are going to officially seek reparations from Russia for the damage to Ukraine. That wouldn't be bringing Russia to the table on a grain deal, I imagine.
Everyone's trying to do what they can to get this all resolved. I don't know I have no idea. I don't think anyone has any idea if the conflict's going to get resolved anytime soon. And no one knows if the grain deal is going to go ahead. We're just going to have to wait and see on the 19th of November what comes of it. And go from there.
But we're not seeing anything in the markets in terms of an indicator of where the market thinks this is all going to go?
In my mind, the market's underpricing the risk of this not going ahead. I think the market thinks that we're going to get to the 19th and the deal's going to be renewed. That's by no means locked in. Putin clearly said we can easily not renew it once it comes around to the 19th of November.
Well, Dennis Voznesenski from Rabobank Agricultural Analyst, thank you so much again for joining us on an update on, two terrible stories, but it does have an impact on the market.
Definitely. Thanks, Ricky.